think one of the challenges is if I were to ask you your story, I can guarantee you, or put anyone in that chair, can guarantee you the most compelling but also transformational parts of that person's journey are things that are buried, hidden, or they don't think they're that important, right?
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Exit Is Now podcast with me, your host, Scott Snider. Moving into the second half of our year here in 2026. And in the second half of the year on our Exit Is Now podcast, we're changing modes. And in the first half, we concentrated on looking at what creates a value creator culture and using my own business, our business, the Exit Planning Institute. Now, moving into the second half, we want to start looking at what activates an advisor. I think it's one of the biggest themes that we see inside of the exit planning space. It's one of the biggest themes that we see really in the EPI community is when you become a certified exit planning advisor, or for our listeners that have read the book Walking to Destiny, we teach you at EPI what I would consider the end game, which means we want the business owner to get into the value acceleration methodology. We want them actively working on their exit strategy, growing a great business, driving value, and aligning business, personal, and financial goals. And I think for the advisors listening in, we get that, right? That is the best case scenario. That's where we want to go. Where we want to get to is really all the stuff that comes before methodology. As we get different generations into the marketplace, as we're working with different types of owners, as more and more owners are embracing value acceleration and working and working on their exit, we need to understand what got them there. And so in the second half of the Exit Is Now podcast, we have brought in different specialists, subject matter experts that have different techniques, styles, and I would say specific lessons for us around what activates us, what brings us towards becoming a best-in-class advisor so that we can be a part of the business owner's path, strategy, and plan. So that's the lead-in really for the next 12 or so episodes as we look towards the back half of 2026. So my first guest is my friend Chris, who we have a cool thing coming out actually this fall. We did this mini docu-series is what I'm calling it with Jimmy Johnson, obviously a legendary NASCAR driver, but now the owner of Legacy Motor Club. And again, for our listeners, for our SEPAs, we understand the work that we're doing at drivevalue.com. And why I brought Chris in for that and why he's here on our podcast today is I just plainly say you're a professional storyteller. I've never seen actually something as unique. And when I got to work with you and Jimmy on that, creating that series that'll debut in the fall, I put it all together for him. We were introduced by a certified exit planning advisor. And I think one of the things that we're going to talk about on the show today is how do we tell our own story as an advisor so that we can come closer to the business owner and have more human experiences. And I think taking the technical aside, the value acceleration methodology aside, how do we start to build that relationship? So thanks for coming in from Seattle, right?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, man, it should be a cool time together because again, I think something that's not as natural for us, even me, in the professional advisory space. So let's kind of take it from the top. But we'll start to dive deeper into your expertise. But at the Exit Planning Institute, we have found that professional advisors have really three core things in common when we look at some of the ones that are high performers, what we would call best in class. They have changed their language and approach with the business owner, moving from more relationship-oriented, less technical-oriented from the start. So it allows them to kind of dive deeper and connect with the business owner out of the gate. We also found that they're lifelong learners, is that their purposeful growth mentality, always trying to evolve the way that they're thinking as the methodology evolves. And they're also become masterful at connecting and collaborating, which is also kind of an art of storytelling as well. And so when you look at our professional advisor and you think about those best-in-class elements and really the EPI community advisors, what do you think the biggest opportunity for advisors is today?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges sometimes in the world that I come from and talking about storytelling is we automatically think, what's the story you tell on stage or in the book or on social media, right? And so for me, it's really starts with the story you tell yourself about yourself. So narrative intelligence is how I talk about it, which is essentially how do you make sense of the past, make meaning of the present, and make wise decisions about the future, right? And the way that we do that is, first of all, being aware of all of the stories from across our journey first. And then for the advisor, with the owners that they're helping them uncover those stories from across their journey and make sense and meaning out of them, right? So it's really not to say that past is prologue, like, hey, this happened in the past, it's going to happen again in the future, but it's let's uncover those stories from across our journey and make sense out of them, right? And so ways that advisors can really kind of raise the bar on how they connect is first just being a good story listener, right? And having questions that you can ask to really draw the person out, right? In business, we have an outcome that we want to drive so often, right? And we come to a conversation trying to get to that outcome, and it's more about how do we ask the right questions and then sit and let the person sit in that and then tease out and trying to pull out some questions from across their journey. And there's methodology that can help with that. But I think that's the first piece, is being a good story listener, and then having that awareness that that our stories shape us, right?
Our stories do shape us. I think that's super interesting. Again, there's a big topic around this activation model that we're creating around these human experiences. And so I think you're absolutely spot on. Is that, again, past, present, future, and how that shapes us, and then how to match that story to where you're at in your conversation. I just think that, your work is unique, and I think more needed than probably ever, because I just think that's what folks are looking for these days. I think folks are looking for human experiences, meaningful stories. They want to get to know you before they know the technical, right? Like we're not leading anymore with the legal, the accounting first. We're saying, look, if you want to come close to the owner, being that core group of advisors that help them do one of the biggest things at their level do, which is transition or sell their company, they have to get to know you. They have to get to know you first.
Yeah, I think so much of it is about alignment, right? So, and I think that's where we can run into challenges where there's lack of alignment between what we're saying and what we're doing and who we truly are, right? And so what this kind of work can do for the advisor as well as the owner is it can help us rewrite the story we tell ourselves about ourselves, the story we tell ourselves about the world and about others and about business, and then the story that we tell to others, right? So if we start with what's the story we tell to others but haven't solved that other piece, that lack of alignment doesn't feel comfortable.
And I think we were talking about this amongst some SEPAs the other day as well, where I think something that also draws us into collaboration. We said one of the best in class elements is this: they've become masterful connecting and collaborating. I was in Chicago at one of our chapter meetings, and they were talking about kind of what we're talking about now. It's like, how do I connect better with people? And I was trying to just be like a fly on the wall at our chapter meeting, right? And I wanted to come and just participate and listen and frankly learn about what our advisors in the field, what are their pain points and desires. And I couldn't bite my tongue anymore. So I asked our chapter president, Tim, I was like, I'd love to just contribute real quick, right? Because he was just going around to the room to these small groups. And I said, we all came here today in this kind of case study session around getting to know the different advisors that play in the exit planning space and when to use them. But what would be on my mind is like, what needs to be true for me to drive you a referral? And again, I thought of you in this answer because for me, that answer would be in part is, like, I don't need to know the technical. Like, I understand you're a lawyer and I understand that you do estate planning, but I want to get to know you, right? So like, maybe it's a little bit more technical. Like, I want to know how you charge. I want to know how what kind of types of clients you work with. I want to know the process. So if I do put you in front of the owner, like, what's the process that you want run through? But I also want to know you, because when I think about what you showed me when you work with Brian, one of our SEPAs, he's able, to your point, to pull from these stories from his life so that he can connect better with the owner. And I think it goes not just for the owner, it connects better, I think, for the professional advisor as well. So it helps us build our teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the challenges is if I were to ask you your story, I can guarantee you, or put anyone in that chair, can guarantee you the most compelling but also transformational parts of that person's journey are things that are buried, hidden, or they don't think they're that important, right?
Yeah.
So
right.
having
That's
a process
probably fair.
to uncover that.
Yes.
So like Brian is like the most prolific storyteller I've ever met. Like he has a story for everything. But he's like, as I'm, I've exited my business and I'm trying to make, figure out my purpose in this next phase, but also tell my story more effectively as a SEPA. And so the core story that we uncovered, and we uncovered a lot of stories, but was when he was a kid, he would, his favorite thing to do was when there'd be a storm, it would wreck the creek, and he would hike miles to get there with his friends, spend all day cleaning the sticks and the trash out of it, get it running clean again. And the only thing that made him happier is when another storm would come and wreck it, and he'd have to do it again, right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of odd,
yeah,
but it's also really magical, right? And so for him, that was just a cool story from when he was a kid. But for me, I was able to look across his entire career and see that arc of scenario after scenario. He went into chaos, and his first book was already going to be called Successful Chaos, of going into family-owned businesses that throwing off cash look great, but under the surface is chaos. But connected that story back to scenario after scenario. He's gone into chaos across his entire career and has brought peace. He's brought order. He's created value, and that's a thing that attracts people, right? So having that core narrative that everything aligns to is pretty cool.
Yeah, and that's probably why he's a great exit strategist, right? That's probably because he's going into a relatively not aligned kind of organized chaos and driving clarity and focus. That's actually kind of a cool thing, and you were able to kind of uncover that. Which kind of leads me to my next question, which is around when we look at this activation model, at the end of the day, what it truly means is that we get the certified exit planning advisor on the business owner's path, strategy, and plan. So I think similarly, as you were talking about Brian, how can we help advisors do that through storytelling?
Yeah, so my background is, since about 2019, I started in advertising, went into marketing, Amazon, Microsoft, and right around 2018, started shifting into what's called strategic narrative. So it's essentially, there's this terrifying study that MIT Sloan did that showed that I think like 27% of senior executives and senior managers could remember more than one of their strategic priorities, something like one, two, three, something like that. But they couldn't remember much of it, right? So it's really about strategic narrative is how do you take a business strategy and translate it into a framework that everyone can get, remember, and execute on, right? Okay. So when I think about storytelling or a narrative related to a business owner, it's starting with the business strategy and then going to what's the differentiated future that client wants to, that owner wants to create before, during, and after their exit. And then it's saying, okay, there's that future. And then let's paint a very clear picture of that with storytelling. Let's make it feel real. Yep. And then let's work back from there and then have a narrative pathway to get there. Like, what do we call, if we're thinking of almost like a movie title, right? What do we call this path to get there? And then maybe what are the messaging, or what are the pillars, the 3 chapters that get us there, right? So it's really, rather than a kind of loosey-goosey, let's tell a story that gets us there, it's business strategy, future, and it's the bridge to get there.
And what about personal planning too, right? I think that's where we also kind of kicked it off, is this concept of, we got the business, we have the 3 legs of the stool, right? The business, the financial, and then the personal. I think that in the activation model as well, bringing a guy like you in to help the owner, what you were kind of just talking about, figure out what's next by going back through their story, because I think it helps us predict the future. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but understand what's coming for us. I just think tying the owner to their come from, like, again, for me, when I hear you tell the story, I guess I'd say it this way, that when I hear you tell the story about Brian and the creek, I come back to 2020. I went through a leadership transformation program that allowed me to understand more about my identity and personal purpose. And what I found, and it was like a huge aha moment, because I always kind of walked around, to be totally honest with you, where I go, okay, I went to school for horticulture, studied plants, owned a landscaping company for 10 years. And then, wore khaki pants and a polo, planting trees, building pools, laying decks, and mowing lawns. And then I buy this company with my dad, which is polar opposite, right? It's polo shirts and slacks, and back in the day it used to be suits and ties. And I'm working with highly educated professional advisors who are very technical in surrounding the business owners. And I always found, like, I like both businesses, but I don't know why. And my why was, and my creek moment, if you will, would be I love transformational experiences, whether it's personally just driven for me or certainly driven for others. I loved, building the pool and the deck for a family and then coming back the next season to mulch and mulch the yard and watching the family have like a family cookout there. That was kind of cool. Whereas I also like EPI and these transformational experiences where I hope even a listener today goes, I've had a huge aha moment. I'm going to change the way I approach the owner. And by changing that, I've affected the owner in bigger ways. And so I think it's just super interesting when you investigate your story, how that could help personal planning for the future as well.
Yeah, I think transition points are fascinating, right? Because when you're going 100 miles an hour, it's very easy to, we have an identity that has served us for years. We're a business owner, we're a dad, we're this, we're that. And often the business takes over, right?
Yeah.
But when we go through that transition, it can really reveal kind of that internal narrative, right? So whether we're talking like a professional athlete retiring, like Jimmy's scenario, we're talking like special operator. I work with veterans and their transitions, or we're talking about owners. Those transition points can be very uncomfortable, right? And so
certainly,
where a couple exercises that I use that can be very helpful is the first one is because again, it's very hard to unearth what those stories are from the past.
Yeah.
And because people just don't get to them on their own. So the first one is a future visioning. So I have people imagine the first week of retirement or the last week of their life and visualizing their whole life like a movie and not controlling it, right? There's just prompts and it plays through people's head and it plays scenes from throughout their life and it just stirs stuff up, right? And then go back to when they were a kid and have them tell stories about something that brought them joy or pride in something they did where there was no extrinsic attaboy or attagirl, right?
Right.
And then do 360s with people who have known them, cared about them, want them to succeed, in some cases for decades, and they tell them stories about them, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And what I've seen, I have one client who's, when we worked together, he was 65, had a phenomenal journey. Worked, as an engineer, worked on rockets and fighter planes, worked in big tech, worked at Microsoft, invented early home automation, quit that, became a movie producer, got his film in nationally, and then it's like, I'm going to go to barbecue summer camp. So now he's a restaurateur. So we start working together. Everything, like from the outside, everything looks great. Mm-hmm. And he was miserable, and he's like, I need a new story to tell, and maybe help me find something else to do, exit my company, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And like, not to sound cocky, like I'm good at what I do and I could not get through. I'm like, actually went back and looked at my contract. I'm like, I don't know how to get out of this thing. Because I cannot get below the surface. Right. And he actually refused to do those 360s.
Oh.
And I don't let clients do that.
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So I went and did them. And so I'll come back to that in a second. So I collected all these stories. Then I looked back at his journey, and there was a story, and we unearth all these stories, and then we create art for each story. There's a headline and a piece of art that, like AI art, that shows that.
Yeah.
So when he's like, when I was a year and a half, I ran away from home. Police had to track me down.
Wow.
And so there's this picture of him. He's from Texas. This little baby with a diaper on with a cowboy hat. Pretty funny. But he's like, I've been on the run ever since. And when I went back in the recordings, I'm like, it's kind of a throwaway line, seems like. But then when I went back, I'm like, wait a minute. Look at his whole through line. Had this extraordinary life. And he's literally been on the run his whole life. Never been happy. And so what I told him, I'm like, if I gave you what you're asking for, which is a new story to tell and maybe, help you sell your company and do the next thing, I would be failing you.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what I'm actually going to give you is a new internal narrative. And then when he heard the stories from all these people that he'd impacted, it literally transformed him overnight. And he's like, and so his new narrative that I gave him was essentially, it was a picture of the pecan tree from his backyard when he was a kid. And his narrative was, I'm finally home.
Oh, wow.
And he's like, I've now found my purpose, which is bringing people joy right where I'm at. And I can do this till I'm 75. Right.
Exactly. Right.
But the key is, he's like, I don't believe this every day. And so I have to meditate on it. And remind myself that this is what it is.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Are you a business owner seeking to unlock the true potential of your enterprise? Look no further than the second edition of Christopher Snider's revolutionary book, Walking to Destiny: 11 Actions an Owner Must Take to Rapidly Grow Value and Unlock Wealth. In this updated edition, Snider presents proven strategies for maximizing your company's value and accelerating growth. Whether you're aiming to sell or simply want to ensure long-term success, this book offers a blueprint for building a thriving, self-sustaining business. Walking to Destiny isn't just another book, it's a game changer, backed by Snider's own experience as a successful business owner and as a CPA. This book bridges the gap between business owners and advisors, guiding you towards financial freedom. But don't just take our word for it. Hear from those whose lives have been transformed by its insights. One satisfied reader raves, "The best guide for transitioning out of privately owned companies. I recommend it to all business owners and advisors." Another praises it on its focus for maximizing business value, calling it their, quote, principal tool for educating owners. Ready to take control of your business's destiny? Visit walkingtodestiny.com now and use code EXITISNOW to claim your free copy of Walking to Destiny: 11 Actions an Owner Must Take to Rapidly Grow Value and Unlock Wealth. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Make the moment perfect by seizing this opportunity today.
Hey there, business owners. Are you ready for a game-changing opportunity? Introducing the 2023 National State of Owner Readiness Report. Over the past decade, this groundbreaking research has reshaped how we view business ownership and exit planning. This report isn't just another study, it's a deep dive into the evolution of business ownership. It shines a spotlight on the crucial intersection of business attractiveness and owner readiness, revealing the undeniable impact of preparation on achieving successful transitions. With younger generations taking the reins, exit planning is taking on a whole new perspective. Education and awareness about preparing for the future have never been more crucial, and with financial readiness leading the charge, there's a clear opportunity for growth and learning. But here's the kicker. The report shows a surge in exit planning education and understanding, yet many still lack formal transition teams, highlighting the essential role of comprehensive support. So who's got your back? Trusted advisors have evolved from CPAs to financial advisors, making a decade of significant change in support networks. Ready to take the next step towards a successful exit? Dive into the Exit Planning Institute's 2023 National State of Owner Readiness Report and start shaping your legacy today. The future is knocking. Are you ready to answer? Discover your readiness level at 2023ownerreadiness.com and take the first step towards a successful and significant exit.
Moving kind of through the process of activation, what is some advice? We kind of danced around it as well. What is some advice that you would have to advisors setting up their practice or their process to embrace owners? And what I mean by that, Chris, is there are CPAs that come to EPI because they work in part with owners, but not their whole practice isn't around owners, but they want it to be. And after they embrace the Certified Exit Planning Advisor training, they go, okay, I'm something different. My approach needs to change. I'm not the estate planning attorney. I'm not the consultant. I'm not the CPA. That's my specialty. Mm-hmm. But now I'm leading with value acceleration. So when you think about your specialty of the storytelling that we've been talking about, what are some advice for an advisor trying to set up their practice to embrace more business owners? How would you answer that?
Excuse me. Yeah, I think it actually comes to in part that 360 exercise. I think can be really helpful.
Yeah.
What I would say is go to past clients and peer advisors, coaches, et cetera, and ask them questions like, what do you think my number one value is? Tell me a story or more, 2 stories about a time I demonstrated that value.
Okay.
If I could only speak or write about one thing for the rest of my life, what would that one thing be, right? So do that 3 to 5 people, and then go to folks that you've worked with that potentially are owners, but you've also served them in other ways, but maybe not, as a CPA, right? Or just go to prospects and ask them about their stories and about their journey and tell them, hey, this is the thing that I'm creating, right? Oftentimes as business owners, just as humans, we try and just build it all ourselves in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And so the first part of going to those people from along your journey, that can uncover some of what your secret sauce is going to be when you combine it with with value acceleration, with your methodology.
Yeah.
So that's the first piece. And then the second piece is just going and talking to that audience.
Yeah.
And without selling and just drawing out, okay, what's the future you're trying to create, and understanding their stories, right? And so then you can start to see some connection point between, okay, here's what my audience needs, and here's the unique thing that I bring when combined with what EPI offers.
Yeah. So I always say I think what you do is truly an art. I find it fascinating. And you mentioned it a couple times as in our conversation so far on the podcast. There's got to be, I don't necessarily need you to tell me the secret sauce, right? But if you can kind of talk to us a little bit about how you get under the surface. You've mentioned it a bunch of times, right? You told that story about that gentleman where you were struggling to get under the surface. But once you get there, it really pulls out those through lines is what you, right? Is a through line that you called it, right? And so what I'm thinking about and why to kind of give you some context to this, I'm picturing I was brought in because I'm the certified exit planning advisor, and I need to start to uncover some things about the business owner. They're likely going to lean hard into their company and want to talk about that, but we all know in this world that it's about business, personal, and financial goals. And I think some of the art that the SEPA needs to really harness and learn is, how do I get under the surface? Because in my opinion, business is very personal, and it's always driving some more personal things. And they might not know it yet, but it goes back to that identity. So can you talk to us a little bit about some early tools or insights or skills that advisors could develop to help them get under that surface?
Yeah, so I think it comes back first to redefining what the role of storytelling is.
Okay.
So I have a model that maps to kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So most storytelling in business focuses on get in the room, get the raise, get the deal, et cetera. And we stop there. The next layer, though, is build. How do you build a team? How do you build a culture, right? So imagine if you and I were to have a conversation about your journey in front of your team, what that can do for them in terms of seeing who you are and where you've come from and how you lead and why you lead the way you do. So there's get, there's build, there's decide, right? Taking those stories from the past, seeing what's worked, what hasn't, what lights you up, what tanks you, right?
Sure.
And then the last piece has become the self-actualization piece, right? And we start to, I think it's, research shows it's around in our 40s, we start to think of our life as a narrative or as like an arc, and what are the through lines, right? But who is it that we want to become, right?
Yeah.
So I think thinking about it in that way and recognizing that, the fancy polished story that we tell has a role to play. But then shifting over on the business side, I think something that can be helpful is that business is all about inputs and outputs. And so the inputs that you have as an advisor, if the only inputs that you have are the data or them talking about their business and the outcomes that they want to drive, you're missing a big chunk of you're missing what's motivating them, where they've come from, what are the things they're trying to avoid doing in the future, all of those kinds of things. And when you have that complete picture and you have those broader inputs, you have just a lot more raw material to work with. So I think an interesting example, and this is not from a small business, it's from a very large business that's maybe anti-small business, Amazon. You can cut that if you need to. But no, so when one of my clients took Amazon Marketplace from 8 employees to about 4,000, probably over 100 billion in gross merchant sales. What's interesting is there was a narrative within the business of we're data driven. You hear that everywhere you go at Amazon. Oh, we're data driven. Show me the data. And what was interesting is their business strategy was that the entire future was based on the belief that the entire future of their business was based on resellers. Because that's what it had been. And so their data reflected who was on the platform. He got invited to Brooklyn to go and meet like second, third generation immigrant families. So let's say, a Jewish family comes over in the 40s and they start a vacuum cleaner repair shop. Well, by the time it gets to the grandkids, they're selling consumables, vacuum cleaner bags, et cetera, having these really successful businesses online.
Right.
So because of those stories and those human connections,
Yeah.
I mean, that obviously moves you emotionally as well.
Yeah.
But this was a very, very data-driven guy, and I'll tell you more about that. But he comes back and says, hey, we actually need to shift our strategy to incorporate these brand owners. And that's now, I think, well over 50% of their business that if the calculations I ran are correct, it's over $1 trillion in gross merchant sales that have happened as a result of those stories. So you think about that internal narrative. If they had locked into that, they would have missed that. Right.
Right. Exactly right.
So it's the inputs, outputs thing, I think, for people that are very like analytical can be helpful to tie into.
Absolutely. So last question as we kind of wind down the show, we hear a lot these days as well inside of our community. If I have another kind of hot topic that EPI gets asked a lot about is the power of AI. Mm-hmm. And I think still the jury's out in our professional advisory space. We obviously have folks that are worried about it. We have folks that are embracing it. We have folks that are kind of in between. In my opinion, it's going to become a big part of what we do as professional advisors for our business owners. I think it's a big part of what we could be doing as professional advisors in terms of AI coaching tools. So we could practice these conversations with an AI tool before we ever have it with a business owner. If you visited your websites and you start to look at some of your stuff, you talk a lot about embracing AI tools as well. So in the world of professional advisory, and maybe just in the world generally, how can we use AI tools to help our practices and approach?
Yeah, I think it comes back to, if you scroll through LinkedIn, you see the amount of repetition of phrases, right? And it's very clear that a lot of people are using it for their content, right? Which comes back to inputs and frameworks.
Okay.
So one of the things EPI does really well is you have really solid frameworks. So right off the bat, my mind is that's a huge win because you're giving AI something to work off of. You're giving it guardrails.
Got it. Okay.
Right, in terms of how you work. And then the next piece that a lot of people struggle with, especially on the storytelling side, is inputs again, right? So we'll say, go and create this thing, but we're not putting fuel in the tank, right? And so imagine if you were to, so like with Brian Sarf, when I interviewed him, there's probably 180,000 words of transcription from all of the stories. Then you take all of those and you synthesize them into specific stories, and you take all of those and synthesize them into a narrative and a messaging framework, and then you align that, and then you put in your business strategy, do his 100 podcast episodes that he's done. All of a sudden, you're sitting on this gold mine of inputs.
Okay.
And then you take your frameworks and you run that through the frameworks. And so if you were to look at Brian just from an executive brand standpoint, what he's able to do because he has those raw inputs and he has frameworks, EPI's frameworks, his own frameworks, he's able to create phenomenal, like on target messaging and content and things like that. So I would think about the moat that you have, and not that, you shouldn't be, be aware that there are threats, but the moat that you have is your expertise, who you are as a person, the stories of what you've done and how you've done it differently from other people. That's what sets you apart. So if you can have those inputs and you can have those frameworks, then you have something very differentiated come out the other end.
That's great advice. That's great. Well, that comes to the end of our show, my friend. So I really appreciate you coming in and giving us your insights around storytelling. Everybody will see this kind of a part of our SEPA activation toolkit. Again, over the next 12 episodes or so on the Exit Is Now podcast, we're visiting with different subject matter experts who have a specialty in each one of these kind of elements of activating ourselves as professional advisors so that we can be a part of the business owner's path, strategy, and plan. So, Chris, I appreciate you flying all the way in, hanging out here and in the podcast studio with us and sharing your knowledge.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me.
And for the audience, we will be back on July 22nd. So please share the podcast with your colleagues, your fellow advisors, as we kind of sharpen our toolkit. I want you to use the podcast in the second half of the year here as I call it kind of like going to the gym. Just turn it on, listen to it, sharpen the toolkit as we move forward and try to activate ourselves so that we can, again, be a part of the business owner's path, strategy, and plan. We'll see you guys on July 22nd. See ya. Thanks.